But first, the bipartisan infrastructure bill is now officially law. President Biden signed the bill in a ceremony on the White House lawn surrounded by nearly 800 guests that included governors, mayors, local leaders, and lawmakers from both sides of the aisle.
I know you're tired of the bickering in Washington, frustrated by the negativity, and you just want us to use and focus on your needs, your concerns, and the conversations are taking place at your kitchen table. The bill I'm about to sign along is proof that despite the cynics, Democrats and Republicans can come together and deliver results. We can do this. We can deliver real results for real people. Let's remember we can come together. And most of all, let's remember what we've got done for the American people when we do come together. I truly believe that 50 years from now, historians are going to look back at this moment and say, that's the moment America began to win the competition of the 21st century. So with confidence, optimism, with vision and faith in each other, let's believe in possibilities. Let's believe in one another. And let's believe in America.
Outgoing Republican Senator Rob Portman of Ohio stressed the financial benefits of the legislation. He says the bill will help lower spiking prices.
At a time of surging inflation, these long-term investments are actually going to help. Inflation, of course, is caused when demand outstrips supply. And in this case, we're not funding stimulus spending that adds to the demand side, but ports and freight rail and roads and bridges and other assets that will help on the supply side. That's why economists say this bill is counter-inflationary, which is so important right now, as American families are facing higher prices on everything from gas to groceries.
Willie, that really, again, that's conservative Rob Portman, a guy who's served in the House and in the Senate. He's always been focused, obsessed on deficits, debt, always been focused on inflationary pressures. And there you have him yesterday talking about counter-inflationary aspects of this bill, something you didn't expect to hear from a Republican yesterday, that's for sure.
Yeah, he also, remember, ran the Office of Management and Budget under Bush 43. So this is a man who knows numbers. He's also a man who's not running for re-election, so can safely stand there. He did give a nod to President Trump, but we have to underline 19 Republican senators voted for this bill. In this day and age, that's not nothing. That's true bipartisanship. 13 Republicans voted in the House. So this was a bipartisan bill. And for as much as we heard from Democrats who don't think this goes far enough, $1.2 trillion is one of the biggest pieces of legislation in the history of this country. So a big achievement, Joe, obviously, for the president, but also for all of us who drive on these crappy roads and travel over these bridges and people who are drinking dirty water in Flint, Michigan. If we can just for a second pause and look at that piece of it, that's better for the country.
I mean, America's infrastructure is lousy. It's been crumbling for years. And Republicans and Democrats alike, you can get every Republican senator out there, regardless of how they voted, because Joe Biden's president of the United States, talking about how critical it is to upgrade our infrastructure. This bill does it. And I'm excited. I'm excited that we actually do have the possibility of getting smart investment into these roads, bridges, like you said, water, broadband, airports. Now, it's going to be extraordinarily important that they make sure that the money gets to the right places, and that it's done efficiently and there's not waste, fraud, and abuse all along the way. So that's the next real challenge. And that's something that the White House is going to have to obsess over. But one other thing, Willie, you know, politically, you have obviously some Republicans, some Trumpists in the House, very angry that others supported a bipartisan infrastructure bill. That's one part of the story. You also, though, have a lot of progressives that have been telling Joe Biden for 9 months, 10 months, stop talking about bipartisanship. Don't bother with bipartisanship. You're from a different era, old man. There aren't bipartisan bills that pass anymore. Joe Biden yesterday got the last word on that. Again, a $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill that was passed with a host of Republican senators, a bipartisan victory, the likes of which we just don't see in Washington much at all anymore.
Goldman is down there.
And he did it yesterday.
Yeah, he absolutely did. Again, 19 Republicans in this day and age is a big, big number to pass a piece of legislation comfortably through the Senate, and then to get those 13 in the House, who, as you say, are now being targeted by Donald Trump, by House leadership. They're going to primary those people for daring to vote for infrastructure in America. Let's bring in the host of Way Too Early and White House bureau chief at Politico, Jonathan Lemire, and congressional correspondent for The Washington Post, author of the Early 202 newsletter, Jackie Alamany. Good morning to you both. John, this has been a long road, a rocky road, a lot of times for this president to get to that bill signing. He's got another big piece of legislation out in front of him. What was it like at the White House yesterday?
It was certainly a moment of triumph, Willie. As you said, this is something, basically the president campaigned on this premise, that he could bridge the divides between Republicans and Democrats, at least on some issues, and deliver for the American people, to prove that the government can still work, to show that democracies can still deliver and be competitive with autocracies like China across the globe. And this was desperately needed, the president has said, and it took a long time to get there. There were lots of twists and turns, even just on this, the bipartisan infrastructure portion in the Senate last summer. We know the way it's wound its way through the House this fall, but it got done, and with some GOP support. And Americans will see the benefits pretty soon. Now, unlike in 2009, this isn't a stimulus. This isn't going to be immediately shovel-ready. The phrase the White House is using is shovel-worthy. But some will see some benefits soon, some will be over a few years, but these will things that Americans need. And it is only, as you say, part one. And there's still a lot of work to be done for that reconciliation piece. And we heard from Senator Manchin recently suggesting that it should go into 2022. And reporters on the lawn yesterday carefully watching Manchin's reaction to various comments from the president, and noted that he was less enthusiastic than some of his Democratic colleagues. Was saying that we need a 24/7 Manchin cam to get his reactions to all the twists and turns ahead. But one of his concerns, the idea of inflation and rising costs. And the White House couldn't have scripted those comments from Senator Portman better than what they got there. A defense from a Republican saying, no, what the country needs right now or is these government investments. That's not going to be the problem. It's a big win for the White House. The president's going to hit the road today, New Hampshire, tomorrow, Michigan, to sell the bipartisan piece as work continues on the Hill for the Build Back Better Act.
So, Jackie, more on part one. The White House was making sure that they celebrated that win, and everybody saw it. I mean, it looked like a party there, and it's as if they were sending a message that America can work in a bipartisan way, believe it or not, even after all we've been through. So talk more about what yesterday symbolized, and also now, does part two perhaps give progressive more of what they want? Are they going to make up for some of the things that were lost in part one? What are the plans moving forward?
You're exactly right, Mika. I mean, I think if we're looking at this in terms of the battle of the backdrop, President Biden got exactly what he campaigned on and exactly what he's been agitating for a year now, really since the American Rescue Plan. This was a picture of everything he has claimed that he is good at, why, you know, the entire genesis of his presidential campaign. And, you know, as Willie said, 19 Republicans signed on to this piece of legislation and are already campaigning on it. You had Susan Collins send out a press release right away yesterday touting the $225 million that Maine is going to get to repair bridges and fund construction throughout the state. You had Mitch McConnell touting the same. He wasn't at the White House signing ceremony yesterday, but he is one of the Republicans who supported this bill. That is, you know, President Biden couldn't ask for more there. But this next path ahead is definitely going to be more tenuous and I think bring back some of the schisms that we have seen crop up in the Democratic Party that Joe Biden has struggled with. And that is because this Build Back Better bill, the one that was supposed to be in tandem with the bipartisan infrastructure bill but was left behind, has been a battle. That's why we need this Joe Manchin cam, because he is the one senator, along with Kristen Sinema, that is holding things up. I think that some really important provisions that House progressives have been asking for, like paid family leave, they've already been warned by Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer last week on a conference call that this could be left behind, that there's not enough room in this package that's already been cut in half. But those negotiations are taking place in the Senate right now. We're going to get the CBO score at the end of the week. It's going to get through the House most likely this week or maybe over the weekend, and then the Senate's going to take it from there.
Okay, Jackie, thank you. And it is the top of the hour. And Daniel Goldman, before you go, we understand you have an announcement that you're going to make exclusively right here on Morning Joe about your political future. What's going on?
Well, Mika, your lead-in about Steve Bannon was perfect because I was on the front lines during the impeachment proceedings as lead counsel, and I've been on the front lines fighting for the rule of law and democracy my entire career. And today I'm announcing that I'm going to run for Attorney General of New York to get back on the front lines to fight these very, very important battles to preserve our democratic values, to preserve the rule of law, and to represent the people of New York as the people's lawyer.
So, Daniel, what would be some of your top goals in office? Is there a direction that you'd want to take the office of AG of New York State?
Well, I think most importantly, we need to have one standard of justice, and everybody needs to play by the same rules. But I think there are bigger fights out there that relate both to New Yorkers and to the nation. Voting rights are being restricted around the country, reproductive rights. Climate change is a massive problem, civil rights, criminal justice reform, and then holding the wealthy and well-connected accountable so that they play by the same rules as everyone else. It's an incredibly powerful office where someone with independence and experience is, I think, really important to have as the leader. And I'd like to be that person to help, you know, on the front lines to make sure that everybody is playing by the same rules. So, Dan, I don't want to throw you a curveball.
Go for it.
On your announcement, but I'm going to throw you a curveball because you talked about voting rights. And I always found it interesting when some commentators were talking about Jim Crow 2.0 for Georgia and Jim Crow 2.0 for Texas, that they would be describing systems that some New Yorkers would go, hey, I would trade what I have to do to vote in New York State or get on a ballot in New York State for that. Because as you know, as a New Yorker, voting lines are horrific, not only in the city, but across the state. It's impossible. A lot of the vote counts take forever. It's impossible to get on ballots almost unless you're in one of the major parties. And it's something Reverend Al has talked about all along. It's one of the most restrictive states in the union to be able to get in, vote easily, and get out. Is there something, and maybe there's not, I'm just curious, but you brought it up. Is there something that you can do as Attorney General to knock down some of these walls for voter access and also for candidate access in the state? Because it's so antiquated. You can tell this all goes back to when political bosses ruled the city.
There is some truth to that, but I think we do need to separate what is going on around the country with the voter suppression laws and the efforts by various states to install elected officials as the kingmaker who can overturn the will of the people.
Oh, yeah.
That is very different than, as you're describing, an antiquated system in New York. I think as Attorney General, there's a large pulpit that I would like to use to revamp the system. I think we've seen through COVID that absentee ballots work very well, and there was a recent law that's been passed to make absentee ballots without cause. Anybody can get it, and I think that's important. But you're right. It's very difficult to both get on the ballot and to vote in New York, and New York should be a leader in the voting rights in all areas as one of the largest, most significant states in the country. And so I would certainly want to use the pulpit to push for reforms so that we can lead on that, as well as all these other issues that are plaguing our country and our democracy.
So, Willie, the two completely separate things, and I agree with what Daniel just said, Willie, that you have access to the polls, which is what I'm talking about. And then you have what's happening after the vote, which, as I've said time and again, I believe is the greatest danger to free and fair elections in the coming years, where you have state legislatures saying, oh, no, we're going to take the power away from local officials. We're going to take the power away from the Secretary of States, who have always done this, but we don't trust them anymore because they wouldn't rig the election for Donald Trump. That really is, I think, and that's not something for Daniel. That's something for the United States Congress. That is something that must be answered before the next election, or we're going to have serious problems as a republic.
Yeah, that's the distinction, and that's one you've been making on this show for months, is what comes after. And there are people being put in place in states across the country who are willing to enforce those laws and say, wait a minute, maybe we can mess with the results of this election and flip it the way we want to. Dan, I wanted to ask you, congratulations first on jumping into the race, about cash bail. A lot of your focus, of course, it's a statewide position. A lot of your focus, will be on New York City. This is a complaint you will hear from the New York City Police Department, from judges who don't believe they have enough discretion. Police officers say it's a revolving door, that criminals are arrested, they come back out the next day, and then they commit another crime. They're seeing the same people. Attorney General James has been grappling with this, saying it probably needs to be tweaked. She's been saying that for almost 2 years now. What's your view of that law that was passed a couple of years ago, and does it need to be changed?
Well, the first and most important part of that law, which I agree with, is that people should not remain in jail simply because they cannot pay bail. And that was really the thrust behind the law. I think as we move forward, we need to look closely at the data. We need to work with district attorneys to see how it's affecting things on the ground. You raise a very good point about a revolving door issue where people very often committing property crimes because of addiction issues will have minor thefts, will go into the jail and get right out and do it all over again. So we do need to tweak that system. Part of my platform, though, Willie, will be broader criminal justice reform so that people with addiction, rather than just cycling through the system, actually get the drug treatment that they need when they first enter the system. And that will help, I think, more than any bail law, because if people can get mental health treatment, drug treatment, can get educational resources, we can keep them out of the system altogether. And that would be, I think, a much greater impact on society even than any cash bail law. But I do think we'll need to look at the data and see what matters and probably make some smaller tweaks. But I don't think, to this point, the data, notwithstanding some anecdotal stories, the data shows that the cash bail law has had any greater impact on violent crime than anywhere else around the country.
All right, Daniel Goldman, thank you very much, and thank you for making the announcement on our show. Good luck to you.
We can no longer talk about the past and the past elections. No matter where you stand on that issue, no matter where you stand, it is over.
Let's bring in right now former Republican governor of New Jersey, Christie. He's the author of the new book, Republican Rescue, Saving the Party from Truth Deniers, Conspiracy Theorists, and the Dangerous Policies of Joe Biden. Governor, thanks so much for being with us. You got a few claps there when you told Republicans that maybe chasing conspiracy theories for the next 4 years isn't the best pathway to victory. Have you been getting a positive response?
Yeah, and look, Joe, we got a standing ovation at the end of that speech. And so, I think, look, what this is all about is for Republicans to be a successful national party and a successful contrast and counterweight to the Democrats and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And to do that, elections have to be about tomorrow, not about yesterday. Voters don't want to hear about yesterday. They want to hear about what you're going to do that's different than the people who are in, and what your vision is going to lead them to in terms of their own hopes and dreams and aspirations. And that's the message of the book. And that's what I think we have to do as a party. And to do that, we got to be the party of truth. We got to confront the truth about what happened in 2020 and to be able to move on from it.
Yeah, isn't that what Glenn Youngkin did? I mean, isn't that why he won in Virginia? He was talking about grocery prices. He was talking about cutting sales tax on rising grocery prices. He was talking about getting parents more involved. He was talking about the future. Is that a roadmap that you're talking about in your book?
It is, and it's a roadmap for the way Republicans have always been successful. Talk about kitchen table issues that matter to the American people, like the grocery tax in Virginia, like Jack Ciattarelli in New Jersey, who came very close to winning in my home state, talking about property taxes and income taxes. You know, these are the things that people care about and they want to hear about. And quite frankly, Terry McAuliffe lost in Virginia after spending a ton of time, talking about the past. And that's not what voters are looking for.
Yeah, and I think Democrats I think that was their biggest takeaway from that race is don't talk about the past. Don't talk about Donald Trump. Talk about issues that matter to people that are in front of them. You know, Chris, I've always found it so ironic, throughout 2020, I would see flags that would be flying that would say, blank your feelings, Trump 2020. And yet all of this, looking back, are just people with hurt feelings about losing a presidential campaign. Biggest tantrum in U.S. history. And I'm not just talking about Donald. I'm talking about a large segment of the entire party has thrown this temper tantrum because they lost an election. Guess what? That happens in American politics. You win some, you lose some. And isn't what makes this country so great is the fact that people that lose elections still buy into American democracy and are part of that peaceful transition.
Yeah, nobody likes to lose, Joe. I mean, nobody likes to lose. But on the other hand, when you deal yourself into this game, what you understand is you have to live with what the results of the hand are. And we lost in 2020. And it's not as if that comes as an enormous shock. I mean, we lost the House in 2018, and then we lost the Senate and the White House in 2020. The trend was moving in that direction for a whole variety of reasons. And at the end of the day, it's the first time that's happened to the Republican Party since Herbert Hoover between 1930 and 1932. And the point of my book is to say, after that, Democrats held the White House for 28 of the next 36 years. I don't believe our country can survive that kind of drought for our party. I don't think it's good for our country to have that kind of drought. So we need to get back to thinking about how you win. Stop Republican on Republican violence and start taking on Joe Biden and Kamala Harris directly on the issues, on policy. And I think if we do that, we're going to win a lot of elections in 22 at the governor's level and in Washington.
Yeah, speaking of violence between friends, my wife is here, and she has a question for you. Friend on friend violence.
I got a
Mika.
couple of questions.
I'm ready.
Hi,
Mika,
Chris.
how are you today?
Great.
Good. Me
So,
too.
I think it's a little convenient to not talk about the past, actually. And I'm just wondering, do you accept that Donald Trump embraced anti-democratic values that damaged our democracy?
What I accept, Mika, is that he has not accepted the results of the election and that undercuts our democracy. And there's no doubt, and I say that very clearly and plainly in the book. And I said that on election night of 2020. I didn't wait for weeks afterwards. On election night on ABC of 2020, I said that his statement after the election was indefensible if you did not have evidence to support the allegation that the election was stolen. Now, maybe that's the old prosecutor in me, but that's the way I feel about it. And I've said it consistently ever since, because there's nothing more important.
I'm just asking about before the election, Chris. I'm just asking if he embraced anti-democratic values that damaged our country, like perhaps saying it was great to get dirt on a political rival from a foreign leader, just name one.
Mika, we could go through the entire history if you like.
Yes, we could.
We could.
Yeah, we could.
But at the end of it, what matters is the American people made a decision in 2020 about who they wanted the next president to be, and they selected Joe Biden. And what we now have to do as a party is to look at ourselves, say, how do we move forward from here? Because this country will not succeed without a vital two-party system. And what we're doing right now, when we look backwards at these things and continue to have kind of grievance and vengeance politics in portions of our party, is not going to be productive to have that two-party system be vital. And for me as a Republican, to put Republicans back in office so those values can be put forward.
I know, but Chris, it's important to actually be able to answer a question about whether or not something was wrong during the Trump presidency. You seem to be conveniently drawing a line at the election. There are a lot of things that happened during those 4 years that you could comment about, but you're not.
And I did in real time, Mika. I did in real time. When I disagreed with President Trump during those 4 years, I said it to him not only privately, but from the perch that I had at ABC and have at ABC as a commentator. And look, that's what you get to do when you've been a friend of somebody for 20 years. You tell them the truth. At least that's what I do. And I told the president the times when I disagreed with him over the course of time, and I detail that in the book. And when I spoke about it both privately and publicly. So this is nothing new for me, and it's nothing personal. It's business, and it's about talking about how we run our country. And when you disagree, even if the person is a friend or an ally of yours, you have an obligation as a public figure to step forward and say it. And that's what I've done, and that's what this book continues to do. But more than that, it lays out a plan for the future.
So what do you think of Liz Cheney looking toward the future, who's essentially standing alone, especially speaking out against Donald Trump and the work that he did to damage our democracy? Should more Republican elected leaders be standing with her?
Republican elected officials should tell the truth. And that's what I do in this book. And the truth is the most important currency in politics. And as far as Liz goes, I've always had great respect for Liz. I still have great respect for Liz. She's smart, she's tough, she's conservative, and she has stood for a lot of the values over the years that I've stood for and that I agree with. So I definitely am a Liz Cheney fan, always have been. And, you know, she is standing up and doing what she thinks is right. Everybody in our party should be doing that. Doesn't mean they have to agree with Liz. It means that they have to stand up and do what they believe is right and then be held accountable for that.
Good morning, Governor. It's good to see you. Let's go back to late February. I'm doing well, my fellow New Jersey native.
Yes.
Let's go back to late February of 2016. You surprised a lot of people when you stepped out on a stage in Fort Worth, Texas, behind Donald Trump and offered your endorsement. That day, you said you were proud to do it. You had just basically taken out Marco Rubio at the debate the night before that. You said that day you were proud to endorse Donald Trump. As you look at everything that happened in the 5.5 years since then, are you still proud to have endorsed him?
Yeah, I think a lot of really good things happened during the Trump presidency from a policy perspective, Willie. And there were things that happened that I didn't agree with from the way he approached the job. And I spoke out against those things. But elections are about choices. And I was explaining to the British ambassador one day when he's asking me about our system. I said, in America, you don't get to necessarily vote for who you want to vote for. You get to vote for who's left. And I do not regret endorsing Donald Trump and having him beat Hillary Clinton. I didn't want Hillary Clinton to be president. I don't think it would have been good for the country. And I'm glad that I did it. And I'm glad that I helped make him a better candidate. And I think that I helped to make him a better president as well.